Hello, we have a fourth line day. We are in gate 34, the gate of power, and the fourth line, which is called triumph. So we have moved to the upper trigram now, and we have a transpersonal skill. We have the ability to externalize power to the other, which also means that the other is something that is already established. The 57, the 10, or the 20, they are something that the 34-4 can recognize. And that's why you suddenly have triumph instead of all of this bully machismo stuff from the lower trigram. Now you are triumphant. When you get to the upper trigram, you get to the line of externalization. There's no question anymore that the power is there, and they know it. They know that they have to put that power across the channel. And in this case, because there are 3 channels, it is putting its power out in a very strong way indeed. The lifetime learning says the freedom is absolute. No, sorry, the freedom in absolute victory to unlimited use of power. This is telling us that the moment that you can be truly mutative, you've got it. For the individual to be truly mutative, all they have to do is live out their nature. They have to know their type, they have to live out their authority, they have to learn to accept melancholy as a creative force in their life, that sadness is of value to them and not a problem, and that happiness is a productive field. The victory in this is being left alone, which is not something that we actually associate with fourth lines, and yet it is part of their makeup. Victory is being allowed to survive out of your own power, not being interfered with, being left alone, not being conditioned away from your individual responsibility for survival. The exaltation says a tendency in victory to restrain excessive power in favor of more subtle and covert styles. The inherent confidence to use power subtly. So these are people who recognize their mutative capacity, but because they also know the other, they know that they have to use their power more carefully. Remember that the inherent power of this gate, at least by the time we get into the upper trigram, is the recognition that the power has a deep impact on others. It's a manifesting generator power when we've got this 20 here. That manifesting part of it has an impact. And the fourth line is concerned with not overwhelming the other, because if you overwhelm the other, there's no success. So it can develop through its recognition of the other. The fourth line is about friendship. Fourth lines are always trying to make friends. The 34-4 wants to make a friendly connection with the other, and they don't want to burn their friends out. Which they can very easily. There's the genetic continuity with the 30th hexagram in the fourth line, which is called burnout. And so they have a way. As long as their friends don't try to influence them, they will use their mutative power subtly. They won't smack them in the face with it. We know that fourth lines are fixed in their nature, and the 34-4 is fixed in showing their power. It's interesting that the more they feel interfered with, the more power they show. And conversely, the less they're interfered with, the less power they show. If you do not get in their way, then you might think they're really nice, very friendly, pussycat. But if you get in their way, we get that friendliness, kindness, meanness dynamic with the fourth line. Yeah, you can see that meanness come out. They can be quite nasty. If you do not get in their way, they get more and more confident as they get older, and they can have a great reservoir of power, but they don't use it in an uncomfortable way. They're responsible with it. They're aware of it. They know how to use it. So it's subtle. Well, if you know how to manage it, it can be really subtle and extremely effective for that subtlety. If that confidence is broken, and most of the time that happens in early childhood, the moment that there is interference, there's the possibility for the abuse of power. They're going to push back harder. I'm going to use that power more. in order to be able to get the triumph that they inherently know is their right. It turns into that. In the detriment, ego gratification in the unrestrained use of power with impunity, inevitably leading to abuse. A lack of confidence that can lead to abuse of power. This is the overwhelming of others because you really don't feel secure in your mutative capacity. This is a 34-4 that tries to hammer its knowing into someone else who really isn't ready for that knowing. Instead of being confident that what you know will have its mutative power and that it will take different time scales with different beings, that's not what happens here. The transpersonal in individuality is rarely of benefit socially, other than in the 2212, which is the only social channel in the individual circuit. Instead, it simply gives the individual a window to see that the other does really exist, and it can be very hard for the individual to actually accept that they exist. Because if the other exists, then they have to have validity, which means they may be an influence that is detrimental to the individual. So these transpersonal lines, they give the individual a grasp that the other deserves some respect. Oops. And nothing gets done without being able to deal with the other. And you cannot mutate them until you really grasp what it is that they're about. If you have a 34 child, 34-4 child in your life, and actually the 34 generally, but specifically here as we're talking about this line, do what you can to encourage their confidence by allowing them to express their individual process. If you don't encourage that confidence, you may later have an adult who has all kinds of problems in dealing with their power. When we look at some of these lines that can be so impactful in the world, we can look at them in the context of the long-term transits. So that's Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, for example. And we can see that when these longer-term transits are active, for example, like in this 34-4, there are thousands and thousands of children who are coming into the world with this configuration. And if they're coming in when the 34 is active in the sun, then we know that they're also going to have that whole channel. But if it's coming in at any time when, the 34 is there, say in Pluto, then you're going to have someone who has this power that may or may not be connected to any of the other ends of the channels that are possible for it. So human design is for children. I mean, this is something that is so clear that Ra brought through. It's for children. And when we look at these sorts of activations, we can really appreciate why. When we look at this knowledge through the lens of raising children, then we can see how they could be aided to or guided to use their power correctly. Pluto was in and out of gate 34 between January 1995 and December 1997. So we have a generation of children who have great power, but many of them, most of them, and of course they're not children anymore, but most of them received a negative conditioning around how to correctly display their power. So the grounding comes through gate 20 in the fourth line of application. The fourth line here, transpersonal empowerment, pulling other people into the now, often with surprising results. When we have the gate of power and we have the gate of the now together, we have the channel of charisma, or not. Got to always have the or not. To have the kind of power that we've been discussing through this transit of the 34, but to have no break on it. It's easy to see the potential for the problems that could come with that. Strategy and authority are obviously going to help here. We know that the sun in the 34 leads us to a manifesting generator type because the earth is going to be in the 20. Waiting to respond is not always easy for this pure manifesting generator. And if you were to add in maybe the potential of emotional definition, you've got another layer of waiting for this, wants to be busy, it's got all this energy. You have the Ferrari at the red light. Really difficult to have all of that power and know where to go with it because you've got nothing to respond to. So education around these kinds of issues can make such a huge difference. Well, we've often seen this for ourselves as adults, as we've come into this knowledge. The things that I know about myself now through studying human design, they've changed my life without any exaggeration at all. So just imagine raising a child to know these things about themselves, to not have to go through all the deconditioning that we have to go through. I know some parents who are doing just that, and it's such a beautiful thing to see. It's not easy raising a differentiated being, but the results are quite remarkable. Venus moves into gate 54 today at 12:33. This is the gate of ambition. The marrying maiden. It's a root center gate, and it's the tribal movement up the hierarchy in order that everybody can benefit, because we can't get there on our own. And those who help us up the ladder can tear us down if we don't take care of them in our turn. Gate 54 leads us up through the stream of instinct to the ego. So the marrying maiden here knows that she might have to massage a few egos on her climb to the top. The moon has been in gate 47 since 8:56 this morning, helping us to make sense of the confusion. It moves into the tribal gate 6 at 2019, the gate of friction and conflict, the solar plexus gate that is the generator of all the emotional waves, the gate that acts like a diaphragm in our body, controlling our pH, controlling what comes in, what goes out, keeping the balance and keeping the boundaries. The moon then moves into gate 46 at 7:45 tomorrow morning. This is the temple, the gate of the determination of the self, the love of the body, or not. It's a gate in the channel of discovery, which is in the experiential sensing circuit, the abstract circuit, that takes us through cycles, that gives us experiences to reflect on, to make sense out of, to learn from, and to share. Thank you very much for joining me for this fourth line in gate 34. I'll be back tomorrow with the fifth line. So until then, much, much powerful love to you all. I don't know, and go gently.